Support for this podcast and the following message come from Dignity Memorial. When your celebration of life is prepaid today, your family is protected tomorrow. Planning ahead is truly one of the best gifts you can give your family. For additional information, visit dignitymemorial.com. This message comes from Instacart. Explaining football to the friend who's just there for the nachos? Hard. Tailgating from home like a pro with snacks and drinks everyone will love? An easy win. And with Instacart helping deliver the snack time MVPs to your door, you're ready for the game in as fast as 30 minutes, so you never miss a play or your seat on the couch. Shop Game Day Faves on Instacart and enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 grocery orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Other fees and terms apply.
Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. All right, here we go. This week, we're connecting the dots between alleged bullying, fact-checking, and Russian election interference. I know. How are all these things connected? Well, we're going to find out with NPR's Huo Jingnan and the Washington Post's tech reporter Naomi Nix. Jingnan, Naomi, welcome to It's Been a Minute.
Hello.
Hi.
What is your favorite dearly departed app? I got to say, for me, my top 2, probably Vine and the Kim Kardashian Hollywood game.
I think I kind of miss the camaraderie when Clubhouse got really popular during the pandemic. Yeah, there was a sort of community and camaraderie of that moment that I miss.
Yeah, it still exists, but it's not anywhere near as engaging as it used to be.
I think I miss the time when I don't have to look at apps.
Here's the thing. We do not know the fate of one of this country's most used apps, TikTok. Will Trump be able to save the app, or will it shut down because of a law passed last year? Time will tell. But here's something we do know. The social media landscape in the U.S. is changing fast. While TikTok is potentially on its way out, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg announced his platforms, aka Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and so forth, will be taking a step back from fact-checking.
We've reached a point where it's just too many mistakes and too much censorship. So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms.
I want to draw attention to the word censorship. It's the word some Republican lawmakers have used to describe efforts to combat misinformation online. In the same announcement, Zuckerberg said, "The fact-checkers have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've created, especially in the U.S." Now, all this signals a vast shift in the social media landscape. One major social media platform could go dark in the United States, while the CEO of several of the biggest platforms we have left is doubling down on culture war politics. And people are wondering, where do we go from here? Naomi, when it comes to the relationship between disinformation and social media, how would you characterize the moment we're in right now?
Yeah, we're kind of having this collision of an increasing sort of decentralization in the social media market, where people get to flock to the apps that they enjoy that might have their kind of partisan leanings. And we're seeing the main platforms walk back many of their programs to fight mis and disinformation. And I think those two things coupled together means that people can kind of go to their own sort of corners and hot pockets of misinformation or hate speech and not get the kind of fact checks and people rebutting those claims to a lesser degree.
Gosh, so it sounds like we are moving toward a place where people will be gathering in fewer and fewer sort of big town square kind of locations online, the way that Twitter used to be or that TikTok kind of is, or I suppose maybe in the future was for a lot of people. People will kind of be in their own silos and also looking at, in some cases, maybe their own versions of what facts are. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Right. People simply just have more options. And various apps have really wildly different approaches to policing speech.
This Zuckerberg announcement, that these Meta programs are going to be rolled back, is coming after his claims of bullying from the Biden administration. And, there are some people, some critics saying that Zuckerberg is pandering to the new Trump administration. Jingnan, can you give us a breakdown of Meta's history with the White House and how this moment might be different?
After news came out in 2016, after the presidential election, that Russia was trying to meddle with American voters, Meta set up this third-party fact-checking program where it pays fact-checkers around the world.
Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we're going to catch all bad content in our system. We don't check what people say before they say it, and frankly, I don't think society should want us to.
Fast forward to 2020, during the pandemic, Meta was really aggressive in labeling and checking false information about the coronavirus.
I think it's been an unprecedented effort to help encourage people to get vaccinated, to promote authoritative information about COVID and the vaccines, and to fight and take down misinformation.
But that all started to change when mostly Republican members of Congress started pressuring Meta for having these kind of communications with the government.
Congressman Jordan's Judiciary Committee produced a report that concluded there's a censorship industrial complex where the federal government and tech companies colluded with academic researchers to disproportionately silence conservatives.
Fast forward to, I think, 2024. As this pressure campaign mounted, we see Zuckerberg's attitude changing. He wrote a letter to Jim Jordan, who heads the congressional committee, apologizing for too much content moderation during COVID.
We do turn now to a story breaking overnight. Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg claims he was pressured by the White House to censor content related to COVID-19 during the pandemic.
Meta also, right before the 2024 election, sunsetted its tool for researchers to track mis and disinformation called CrowdTangle. And these are all the things that have happened before. It finally did away with fact-checking altogether.
I mean, Zuckerberg made some accusations saying that the Biden administration would call his employees and yell at them until they took their content off their platforms. I mean, it sounds like this could be perhaps, old business dressed up in new clothes for a new president.
It's definitely true that during the pandemic, the Biden administration was particularly aggressive at making sure that Meta removed what they considered to be COVID-19 related misinformation. I think we might all remember that moment when Joe Biden essentially accused Facebook publicly of killing people. But it's also true that, to be clear, both Republicans and Democrats, politicians, have always tried to, quote unquote, work the refs at social media companies, either advocating, whether it's advocating getting their, personal information off the site, or advocating, an expansion of harassment policies. That pressure has always been there, but tech companies have always had the freedom to say no. And I think what we've seen, even in the Biden administration example around COVID-19, is Meta said no a lot. Because at the end of the day, they don't actually have to take orders from any politician about what kind of content should or shouldn't be on their site unless there's some sort of law or regulation passed. And so, I think the case definitely brought up interesting questions around what should the relationship be between how the government interacts with social media companies behind the scenes.
It's kind of an interesting contrast on how he seems to be really actively saying yes to the Republicans' frame of narrative when he announced that Meta is going to, have all of these changes to content moderation and fact-checking, because he is essentially accusing fact-checkers of being part of some kind of censorship machine that is within his own company.
Right. And in an interview with Fox and Friends, Meta Chief Global Affairs Officer Joel Kaplan further clarified this reasoning.
They've just become too restrictive over time about what people can say, including about those kind of sensitive topics that you mentioned that people want to discuss and debate. Immigration, trans issues, gender. We want to make it so that, bottom line, if you can say it on TV, you can say it on the floor of Congress, you certainly ought to be able to say it on Facebook and Instagram without fear of censorship. So we're changing those rules.
And fact checkers that my colleagues and I have talked to were very bewildered by this accusation, because they're if Meta wanted to complain, they could have complained, but they never did. So censorship has been this frame that is very, very dominant in the Republican circles. Like this is the reason that Congressman Jordan is going after all of these researchers and all of these organizations aiming to add context to and curb mis and disinformation. And it seems that Zuckerberg really, really actively embraced it.
I think you're right. His use of the word censorship was a big rhetorical win for Republicans and conservatives. In previous years, the company would have used the industry's word, which is content moderation, right? They would not have framed those programs that they had worked on for years as a form of censorship.
And I just wanted to add some more context when it comes to like the role of fact checkers. Like fact checkers cannot remove content.
They just flag content. Is that right?
Yeah, they're like tipsters. And the company themselves, like they make the decisions on what they do with that tip. So a lot of fact checkers has been telling us that, well, like how is adding context to information censorship? Because isn't censorship
removing something? And like you said, that's the call that Meta would make, not the actual fact checkers. That's interesting. Well, I want to talk about another change that we are seeing at Meta. Meta has also revised its hate speech policy. The latest guidelines now allow allegations that LGBTQ plus people are mentally ill because they are gay or transgender. Coming up, what Meta's new guidelines might mean for the safety of LGBTQ people online. Stick around.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Sattva. Founder and CEO Ron Rudson shares the story of how he got started creating Sattva.
In 2007, 2008, I went out and I bought the most popular luxury mattresses. I tore them apart and I realized, based on the raw materials cost and the analysis that I had done, that I was able to sell that level mattress, but with a very affordable price.
To learn more, go to SAATVA.com/NPR.
This message comes from Charles Schwab. When it comes to managing your wealth, Schwab gives you more choices, like full-service wealth management and advice when you need it. You can also invest on your own and trade on Thinkorswim. Visit schwab.com to learn more. This message comes from Grainger. As a maintenance specialist for a historic high-rise, you know that vintage charm historically needs constant attention, which is why when it's time to upgrade turn-of-the-century mechanicals, they turn to Grainger. With easy access to 1 million-plus products and the scale to deliver when and where you need them, the right tools and supplies are never far away, so you can keep that vintage building running like new. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
This message comes from Carvana. Finance your next car the convenient way with customizable, transparent terms all online. Make your budget work for you and swap hassle for convenience with Carvana.
I want to talk about another change that we are seeing at Meta. Meta has also revised its hate speech policy. The latest guidelines now allow allegations that LGBTQ plus people are mentally ill because they are gay or transgender. Here's what the guidelines say now. Quote, "We do allow allegations of mental illness or abnormality when based on gender or sexual orientation, given political and religious discourse about transgenderism and homosexuality." I do want to note here the use of transgenderism and homosexuality, which are words primarily used by people who want to denounce queer people. On top of that, Facebook will also move its trust, safety, and content moderation team from California to Texas in a move that Zuckerberg said was intended to quell concerns of political bias. And both Meta and Amazon are scaling back their DEI initiatives. So that's a lot. That's a lot happening at one time. I wonder, what do these changes mean for marginalized communities in online spaces?
Yeah, it can be a little bit too early to tell. I talked to this former Facebook employee who used to work on trust and safety, Katie Harbeth, and she said, like, tweaking what users eventually will see, it depends on how exactly Meta tweaks the algorithm. And the announcement provides not a lot of that kind of detail. Like, it's maybe too early to tell. But she does also say that a bad scenario will be, well, marginalized groups may have to consider whether or not they stay on that platform. Like, is it worth it?
Is it worth it? Yeah, it's a very good, it seems like it's a question that's going to be coming up a lot in the future in regard to some of these platforms. But Naomi, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I think, though, that Meta saying that is an important signal to the social media ecosystem. Like, remember back when Elon Musk took over the platform, we saw a rise just from that fact alone. Like, the rules hadn't really been substantially changed at that point. There hadn't been a lot of changes to what was then called Twitter, but we saw like a rise in bigotry on the platform. Researchers were sort of tracking it just by the fact that he had taken over the company. And so I think Meta kind of laying out, here's exactly the ways that we are sort of rolling back these hate speech rules and the kinds of claims that actually we're going to go out and publicly say you're allowed to say. That alone might be an important signal to people in the social media ecosystem about what they choose to share on the platform, who chooses to join the platform. Time will tell. It was kind of like Mark Zuckerberg planting a flag in the cultural wars is how I kind of saw it, and sort of like moving the bounds of like what is considered acceptable speech. And now, of course, what the company argues and what he argues is that we're just trying to catch up the hate speech rules to what mainstream discourse actually is. That's kind of the argument, but it's definitely a notable shift in tone from the company.
They, in a big way, are moving the goalpost on what constitutes civil engagement.
Social media has enabled people to have their own bespoke realities. And I think with the going away of fact checking, it's just one step towards even more bespoke realities, because then you're not going to have a tag telling you to look elsewhere.
Bespoke realities. That's a very helpful and sobering clarification. I really appreciate that. Jingnan, Naomi, I have learned so much here. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
That was NPR reporter Guo Jingnan and Washington Post tech reporter Naomi Nix. I want us all to pause for a moment and show some love to the city of Los Angeles. For the past week, wildfires have ripped across the LA area. I have been heartbroken seeing images of the wreckage, and I know many of you have been too. We know these places, and we know people who've had to evacuate. LA is an iconic city. It lives in our collective imaginations, but it's also a very real place that millions of people call home. So I reached out to the NPR staff and the public to share what makes Los Angeles so special to them. Here is our love letter to LA.
Hi, my name is Sam. My favorite memory of LA is when I organized a graduation photo shoot with friends at our favorite taco stand at the intersection of Pico and Hobart. Before our ceremony, we took pictures by the stand in our graduation sashes, holding heaping plates of al pastor tacos. I love LA street tacos, and I love the people that make them. They bring a sense of community to almost every corner of the city, and I think that's beautiful.
My name is Katie Ward. Back in 2017, on October 31st, Halloween night, the Dodgers were playing against the Astros. And as we were trick-or-treating, every single house had the game on. And so we would send the kids up to the door to trick-or-treat and get their treats, but they would also ask, did we make it to third? Did we get them out? So go Dodgers. We love you, Los Angeles. We're all going to get through this together.
Hi, this is Jeff. LA has a food called the pastrami dip, and you can get them all over LA. You'll see the signs that say burgers, malts, and pastrami, and there's this pastrami that's been kind of soaking in a savory juice, and they put it on a soft white roll, and they squeeze some yellow mustard on there, and they put some pickles on there, and then they just pile that pastrami up and wrap it up in a white piece of paper, cut it in half, and give it to you. And I love the people, I love the diversity, don't love the traffic.
Chandrika here. I just want to say, LA, stay strong. We are with you, we're behind you, and we will get through this.
Well, my first visit to Los Angeles was more than 40 years ago. My parents had recently divorced, and my mom moved back to Southern California. We were having a rough go of it, and so she planned a day for us to spend in Griffith Park. It was so beautiful in so many ways. I am hoping that for everyone impacted by the fires in Los Angeles, that they too very soon have those days and can begin that healing journey as well.
Hi, My name is Patrick Murray. I'm an audio engineer with NPR and have been with the company for 28 years. In 2002, I was based at the San Francisco Bureau when news came that NPR West would be built in LA and my job was moving. This was not a move I wanted to make. However, I was given some great advice: embrace its sense of diversity, and if you can swing it, find a tour guide. One of the things I discovered was a group called the LA Maritime Institute. One day, after about a year and a half in LA, we're heading to Catalina on a bright, beautiful March day with all 13 sails unfurled. I was hanging out on the bowsprit when a pod of 20 dolphins started jumping in our bow wave. It was at that moment LA stopped sucking. Fast forward to now, I did find my tour guide, a native Chicana Angelina whom I married.
My name is Dalia Mortada, and it's pretty hard to choose a favorite memory in LA, but one that's very much front of mind right now is a hike that I took when I was about 10 weeks pregnant with my son. And it's this beautiful hike right in Altadena. You know, you climb 2,000 or so feet, 2,500 feet above sea level, and you can just see certain buildings peek out through the fog. And it's something that I'm so grateful I got to share with my son in utero, and something that I hope to share with him in the future.
My name is Jenny Chang, and I believe the recent fires have really shown us how much stronger the city has become as a community. Whether we are current or former residents, LA continues to bring us together. And whether we stay or return to this incredible city time and time again, like myself, LA residents will always be resilient.
My love letter to LA is because it is where I was born and raised. I did K through college here. It is my hometown. It's a city that I have always loved and cherished. My husband and I have had 2 of our 3 children here, and there's no greater place to live or be. I will love LA for the rest of my life.
Hi, this is Mandalit Del Barco, NPR's entertainment correspondent. I've lived in LA reporting for NPR since the early 1990s, and LA's been through a lot, but we're always ready for a sequel.
We love you, LA. Love all of us. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Barton Girdwood, Corey Antonio Rose.
This episode was edited by
Jasmine Romero.
Our executive producer is
Verilyn Williams.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
This message comes from Bombas. Socks, underwear, and T-shirts are the top 3 requested clothing items by people experiencing homelessness. Bombas makes all 3 and donates 1 item for every item purchased. Go to bombas.com/NPR and use code NPR for 20% off. This message comes from Bombas. Socks, underwear, and T-shirts are the top 3 requested clothing items by people experiencing homelessness. Bombas makes all 3 and donates 1 item for every item purchased. Go to bombas.com/NPR and use code NPR for 20% off. This message comes from Sony Pictures Classics presenting The Room Next Door, the first English-language feature film by Pedro Almodóvar starring Julianne Moore and Tilda Swinton. After years of being out of touch, 2 friends meet again in an extreme but strangely sweet situation. Winner of the Golden Lion for Best Film at the Venice Film Festival, The Room Next Door is now playing, only in theaters.